The story begins in a snowy forest, where a pink-haired boy named Dada is running for his life from a blood-sucking demon. The forest is full of these demons, and several soldiers were sent here to kill them. Almost all of those soldiers are now dead, and their corpses are scattered across the battlefield. Dada runs as fast as he can while carrying a large box, but one of the demons finally catches up to him and knocks him down. With no strength left, he crawls into a small hole and tries to push himself deeper inside, while shouting for his partner, Xylo, to hurry up and kill the monster. Just before the demon can eat him, Xylo flies down from above and kills it instantly with his knife. After that, Xylo tries to hold Dada still and stop the bleeding, but Dada is in extreme pain. He keeps moving around and tells Xylo to just kill him already, saying they'll resurrect him later anyway. Xylo refuses and says he doesn't want to carry Dada's dead body all the way back. He then hits Dada to snap him back to his senses and tells him not to take resurrection so lightly. Xylo explains that resurrection isn't some easy miracle. It's a harsh process that pulls their souls out of hell and forces them back into their bodies. It also causes serious side effects, damaging memories and a person's sense of who they are. Xylo starts to wonder if Dada has forgotten this because he's died too many times already. After hearing this, Dada finally calms down. Xylo then heats up his blade and presses it against Dada's wound to seal it using thermofusion. The pain is unbearable, and Dada screams loudly through the forest. Once the bleeding stops, the two of them sit beside a small fire. Xylo tells Dada that the demons, called fairies, are moving together in an army of more than 5,000. Dada is shocked and asks how just the two of them are supposed to face that many monsters. Xylo tells him they aren't meant to fight them all. The forest will soon be consumed by demon blight, so their job is to support the holy knights until they can safely retreat. After that, they'll retreat as well. Xylo knows Dada is terrified, so he warns him not to even think about running away. He reminds Dada about the markings on their necks, which would kill them permanently if they disobey orders or try to escape. This is the life they were given, and they have no choice but to accept it. Xylo stands up and says they should leave, but he suddenly notices a strange, mystic coffin nearby. He immediately knows this is Dada's doing. Since Dada is a chronic thief who steals things simply because he can, they prepare themselves and open the coffin, expecting to find the body of a noble or a high-ranking knight. Instead, they're shocked to see a goddess inside. Dada has no idea what a goddess is, so Xylo explains that goddesses were living weapons created many years ago to fight the demon lord. Dada remembers hearing stories about them before, but he never imagined one would look like such a cute girl. Suddenly, a loud horn echoes through the forest. They rush to the edge of a cliff to look around. Xylo thinks it must be a recon unit signaling the other soldiers, but Dada notices a group of holy knights below being overwhelmed by several fairies. Most of the knights are being eaten alive, and only their leader is skilled enough to keep fighting. Seeing this, Dada tells Xylo they should run away and find somewhere to hide. Xylo, however, sees that not all the soldiers are dead yet. Some of them are still barely alive and fighting. He decides that the best choice is to help at least half of the holy knights escape, since saving more people will greatly increase the mission's success. He makes up his mind and declares that they'll save them before the sun goes down. Just then, their plan changes. The goddess inside the coffin suddenly wakes up and calmly walks toward them. She greets Xylo, calling him the knight in charge of her. She says she'll help them defeat the fairies below and guarantee their victory, as long as they praise her and rub her head. Hearing this, Xylo feels certain of one thing: that endless desire for praise and attention proves without a doubt that she's truly a goddess. The goddess introduces herself as Tiorida, a guardian goddess whose role is to bring miracles to people in need. She slowly stretches out her hand toward Xylo and tells him that he should rely on her as much as he wants, because protecting and supporting him is her life's purpose. However, Xylo does not look excited at all after hearing this. Instead, he looks annoyed and pretty pissed off. He finds the whole situation completely ridiculous because he hates goddesses and absolutely hates the idea of relying on anyone else. Xylo bluntly tells Dada to keep an eye on her, then immediately jumps off the cliff without hesitation to go save the knights below. He does this because he prefers to work alone and see himself as a lone wolf who does not need help from anyone. Dada, who naturally has very sharp eyesight, pulls out his binoculars and uses them to carefully scan the battlefield. He then gives Xylo directions, telling him where the monsters are gathered the most and where the fighting is the heaviest. As Xylo glides down the cliff, the next thing he notices is Tiorida suddenly appearing right beside him in midair. Irritated, he asks her what she thinks she is doing here. Teorita calmly reminds him that he is her knight, which makes it her duty to stay by his side at all times, protect him no matter what, and make sure he achieves victory. Hearing this only makes Xylo angrier, since he hates the thought of depending on another person. He tells her that he does not need her help at all. Right after that, Xylo seals his blade with intense heat and throws it straight at one of the fairies. The blade explodes on impact, causing a massive explosion that shakes the area. The blast successfully draws the attention of the other fairies, pulling them toward Xylo and away from the Holy Knights, exactly as he planned. Xylo then tells Teorita to find a tree and hide behind it, while he takes care of the monsters on his own. Xylo charges straight into the fight headfirst, even though he is badly outnumbered. He puts on an incredible performance, cutting down every single fairy that attacks him without hesitation. Dada eventually joins the battle as well. He is clearly scared at first, but he manages to gather his courage and defeat one of the fairies by himself, surprising even himself. Meanwhile, Teorita struggles to keep up with the fast pace of the battle. She quickly becomes exhausted and starts breathing heavily as she tries to move around the battlefield. While Xylo continues fighting, he suddenly gets cut on the leg, which leaves him open to an attack from the side. He is just moments away from being eaten when Dada saves him by firing magic at the attacking fairy. Xylo quickly thanks Dada for the help and immediately rushes toward the next swarm of monsters without slowing down. By the time night falls, all the fairies have finally been defeated. The knights gather around a campfire to rest after the battle. Xylo, completely exhausted from all the fighting, sits down on a nearby rock to catch his breath. The leader of the knights walks over to thank him for his help. But after taking a closer look at the marking on Xylo's neck, his expression suddenly changes. He draws his sword after realizing that Xylo is a penal hero. Being saved by a penal hero could seriously damage their reputation, so the knights are clearly unhappy about it. Teorita steps forward to defend Xylo, but the knight leader immediately realizes that she is a goddess. The knights begin questioning Xylo about when and how he managed to get his hands on a goddess. Teorita notices that the situation has suddenly become very tense and starts to regret stepping out at all. A fight is just about to break out when Dada tries to calm everyone down. Before anything can happen, they are suddenly interrupted when their companion Venetum speaks through their communication seal. Venetum announces that the situation has become extremely dangerous. He explains that the Holy Knight's main force has begun advancing toward the demon blight. Xylo shudders in shock when he hears this. Venetum then adds that the soldiers who were regrouping in the forest have already formed a battle line against the demon blight, planning to stop its advance right there. Hearing all of this, Xylo questions the knights about who gave them such reckless and dangerous orders in the first place. However, when he looks at the expressions on their faces, he quickly realizes that no one forced them to do this. This was a decision they made on their own. Their leader openly admits it and says that all of them believe deeply in Commander Kivia's rule and leadership. Because of that belief, they are fully willing to sacrifice their own lives for what they see as the greater good. Venetum speaks up at that moment and explains why letting the Holy Knights die would be an absolute disaster. He tells Xylo that if more than half of the Holy Knights are killed, the hero unit's entire operation would be labeled a massive failure. If that happens, it would be extremely bad for Xylo. He would not simply die. Even after being resurrected, he would be burned at the stake as punishment. Hearing this, Xylo's expression turns serious. He asks Venetum where the Holy Knights are planning to intercept the enemy. Venetum quickly checks his map and answers that the Holy Knights are currently in formation at the safest crossing point along the Purcell River. After hearing this, Xylo turns to the Holy Knights and tells them that if they are thinking about regrouping with the main soldiers, they should forget about it. He explains that doing so would only get in the way and make things worse. However, the Holy Knights disagree. They say they are fully prepared to live and die for their commander and refuse to back down. Even so, Xylo advises them to head south and retreat instead. He tells them that he has already driven back the fairies that crushed the guerrilla unit, so pulling back is the smartest option. The leader of the Knights clenches his teeth as he realizes that Xylo is right and that they truly do not have many choices left. The leader then asks Xylo if he really plans to cover their retreat. Xylo answers without hesitation and says that is exactly what he intends to do. He calls out to Dada and tells him to continue the operation as planned and guide the Holy Knights to their retreat point so they can avoid being wiped out. Dada strongly disagrees with this plan because he believes Xylo is risking his own life just to save the Holy Knights. Xylo responds by telling him that there is no other option. If the Holy Knights die, then they are finished as well. Meanwhile, the Holy Knights stationed at the Purcell River begin their battle as the monsters finally start to approach. Using their military equipment and formations, they manage to defeat the first wave of monsters. However, the situation quickly becomes more dangerous when it is revealed that the enemy force includes a giant troll. In response, the knights activate their large lightning staff and use it together to bring the massive massive creature down. From a distance, Xylo and the others watch the battle unfold. Xylo carefully studies the army below and realizes that he does not recognize these soldiers at all. In fact, he has never seen their army crest before. Because of that, Dada believes there is no reason for them to get involved at this point. However, as Xylo continues watching, he notices that the soldiers are slowly being overwhelmed by the growing power and numbers of the fairies. Seeing this, he suggests that they should head down there and offer some support, but when he turns around to speak again, he realizes that Dada is already gone. All that remains is a note Dada left behind. The note tells Xylo to go ahead and do his thing, while Dada goes off on his own to steal anything valuable he can find from the knights. Seeing that Dada pulled a stunt like that, Xylo grits his teeth and swears to himself that he is going to kill Dada the next time he gets his hands on him. His anger barely has time to settle before something else catches his attention. Xylo suddenly spots a large swarm of fairies moving quietly through the air, clearly preparing to ambush Commander Kivia's army from the side. Reacting instantly, Xylo activates a flight seal and shoots through the air toward them. He reaches the swarm just in time and immediately begins attacking. Using his magic knives, he strikes down as many fairies as he possibly can, moving non-stop and without hesitation. The battle drags on for several intense minutes, but Xylo does not slow down. In the end, he manages to completely wipe out the entire swarm by himself. After the fight, Commander Kivia rides up to him on her horse. She looks at him carefully and asks who he is and why he is here on the battlefield. Before Xylo can answer, Teorida suddenly appears out of nowhere and loudly calls him out for abandoning her earlier. Commander Kivia immediately recognizes Teorida as a goddess, which only makes her more curious about why a goddess is following this strange man. Xylo looks annoyed and casually pushes Teorida forward, telling Kivia that he hasn't entered into any sort of pact with her yet. He even says that they can take her if they want. Teorida, however, has already grown attached to Xylo and does not feel comfortable being separated from him. She stays close to him despite his words. Still, Commander Kivia does not accept this as a proper explanation and demands that Xylo explain exactly what is going on. Xylo turns away instead of answering. He tells her that now is really not the best time for long explanations. As he stares into the distance, he can clearly see the demon lord drawing closer and closer. The danger is obvious. Suddenly, a new wave of demons appears and begins advancing straight toward their position. The soldiers panic when they see the approaching enemies and begin firing their cannons without waiting for orders from Commander Kivia. However, their attacks fail. The demon lord creates a powerful force field that easily deflects the cannon fire. Seeing this, Xylo immediately understands that long-range attacks are useless and that they will have to rely on close combat instead. He quickly asks Commander Kivia if they have a battering ram or a catapult ready to use. Kivia shakes her head and tells him that those weapons are still being prepared back at the capital and have not arrived yet. Commander Kivia briefly considers mobilizing even more units to reinforce the front lines. However, Xylo immediately stops her. He tells her that doing something like that would be a stupid idea because it would only lead to more pointless deaths. It would sacrifice the people carrying the sacred seal and even damage the land itself. The demons continue slowly but surely move closer to their position, and it becomes obvious that the soldiers can no longer hold the front line much longer. Seeing this clearly, Xylo tells Kivia that she needs to order an immediate retreat for her troops. Deep down, Kivia understands that Xylo's plan is the most reasonable and logical option. Even so, she stubbornly refuses to accept it. Instead, she cancels the retreat order and keeps her soldiers on the front lines. She is fully prepared to sacrifice her own life and the lives of her soldiers for the sake of her honor. Xylo explains that the main reason he came here in the first place was to support their retreat. If everyone dies here, it will be counted as a failed mission on their side, and the punishment they receive afterward will be severe. Hearing this, Kivia realizes that Xylo is a penal hero. She coldly tells him that she does not care what happens to people like him. In her eyes, penal heroes are filthy criminals who are not even allowed to die properly. On top of that, headquarters already stated that the final judgment belongs to the commander on site. Because of that, Kivia declares her final decision. Her command is for everyone to sacrifice their lives for honor and to turn this battlefield into their grave. Xylo thinks this obsession with honor is complete nonsense, but Kivia firmly explains that for knights, honor is everything that matters. Before their argument can go any further, their conversation is suddenly interrupted by an attack aimed directly at Kivia. She narrowly dodges it at the last second. When she looks up, she sees a massive bug-like demon that begins firing its demon eggs toward the battlefield. As soon as the eggs hit the ground, they instantly hatch and start devouring the soldiers alive. To make things even worse, the regular monsters continue closing in from all sides, turning the situation into a full-scale catastrophe. Kivia shouts orders for her soldiers to hold the front line no matter what. The soldiers obey without hesitation, but it is painfully obvious that they are already at their limit. At the same time, a giant bear troll faces Kivia and prepares to attack her directly. Xylo rushes in at the last possible moment and throws explosives at the troll's back, stopping it for a brief moment. He then leaps forward and drives his knives into the monster's back, trying to kill it. However, this time, the blades snap and break inside the troll's body. Xylo jumps back toward Kivia and the others and quickly warns them that normal attacks do not work on trolls. To defeat them, they will need something far more powerful. Meanwhile, several of the bug demons begin messing with the lightning cannons. One of the cannons tips over and fires wildly, triggering a massive explosion that shakes the entire area. The blast knocks Xylo unconscious for a short moment. When he wakes up, he finds himself lying on the ground. Nearby, he sees Teorida lying not far away. She desperately begs him to use her power to deal with the situation. She tells him that at this rate, everyone on the battlefield is going to die a horrible and painful death. Xylo slowly struggles to his feet and says that he swore he would never form a contract with a goddess again after what happened last time. However, as he hears the sickening sounds of soldiers being crushed and eaten by monsters, his resolve begins to waver. Teorida pleads with him again, saying that if this continues, even more people will die. She tells him that using her power is the only way to stop this disaster. Xylo thinks it over for several long moments. Even though he hates the idea with every part of himself, he finally realizes that there is no other choice left. He walks over to Teorida, cuts his hand open to draw blood, and offers it to her. Teorida drinks his blood, and in that moment, the contract between them is formed. After the pact is completed, the blood dries up, and the wound on Xylo's hand closes on its own. Now that the contract has been formed, Teorida is finally able to unleash her full power without any limits. As the goddess of the sword, she raises her magic and calls upon her authority. Swords begin to rain down from the sky in overwhelming numbers. Each blade strikes only the monsters with perfect accuracy, completely avoiding every single soldier on the battlefield. Not a single ally is harmed. The monsters that had been so difficult to fight, the ones that took countless lives and pushed the soldiers to the brink of despair, are all wiped out in a single strike from Teorida. Watching this, Xylo gains a much clearer understanding of just how terrifyingly powerful her ability truly is. The scale of her power is far beyond what he imagined. Teorida feels extremely proud of herself after seeing the result. She happily turns toward Xylo and asks him to praise her by giving her head rubs. Xylo, however, walks straight past her without stopping and tells her that they still have a lot of work left to do. The first thing they need to deal with is the remaining fairies. Xylo picks up a sword lying on the ground and throws it straight at one of them, killing it instantly. However, more fairies continue to approach. Xylo then tells Teorida to keep supplying him with swords over and over again. As swords appear one after another, Xylo uses them to quickly wipe out the entire wave of fairies without slowing down. After finishing them off, Xylo looks back and sees that Commander Kivia is still alive. He immediately orders her to gather the uninjured soldiers and have them finish off whatever monsters remain. Kivia is about to lecture him, telling him that he has no authority to give orders like that. However, Xylo cuts her off mid-sentence and tells her that this is necessary to ensure everyone's survival. He adds that he does not plan on dying here, at least not in this way. Xylo then turns his back on her and starts walking away. He says that once everything is over, he is willing to accept whatever punishment or praise comes his way. But for now, their main objective is clear. They must defeat the Demon Lord. Xylo picks Teorida up in his arms and launches himself straight toward the Demon Lord. On the way there, they notice another wave of fairies moving in their direction. Teorida offers to handle them herself, but Xylo immediately refuses. He tells her that wasting her power on weak monsters like these would only drain energy she needs for the real fight ahead. With that decided, Xylo holds Teorida with one arm and takes down the entire wave of fairies by himself in record time. Not long after, the two of them finally come face to face with the Demon Lord. Teorida believes this is the perfect moment for her to take full control of the battle, since defeating the Demon Lord has always been her lifelong dream. Xylo tells her it is not time yet. He moves closer and provokes the Demon Lord by throwing a knife into one of its legs. The Demon Lord lets out a painful roar in response. Only then does Xylo give Teorida the signal. He tells her to clear a path. Teorida raises her power once more and rains swords down from the sky, completely crushing the wave of fairies standing between them and the Demon Lord. With the path cleared, Xylo launches himself upward and confronts the Demon Lord head-on. He is about to give Teorida his next command, but she already understands what he wants. Without waiting, Teorida summons a massive mystic sword filled with divine power. Xylo grabs it and hurls it straight into the Demon Lord. The impact causes a violent explosion that shakes takes the battlefield. Xylo crashes back down to the ground with Teorita still in his arms. From the looks of it, the Demon Lord appears to be collapsing, finally defeated. However, that hope does not last long. The Demon Lord begins regenerating its body parts and suddenly launches another attack straight at them. In the next moment, Xylo loses consciousness. When he opens his eyes again, he sees Teorita desperately trying to wake him. She asks him how badly he is hurt, especially after he used his own body to shield her at the last second. Xylo slowly turns his head to the side and is surprised to see Dada standing there, staring at him with his usual calm and casual expression. It turns out that Dada had been off stealing things this whole time and has just returned. This time, he managed to bring back a scorched terrain seal. For the first time in a long while, Xylo is actually glad that Dada stole something, because this seal is exactly what they need to take the Demon Lord down once and for all. Xylo immediately recognizes the model of the seal. It is a type of reactor he is very familiar with, so he knows exactly how it works and how dangerous it can be. Without wasting any time, he jumps high into the air and throws the seal straight into the Demon Lord's body. Right after that, he grabs Dada and Teorita and leaps away from the area with them just in time. A moment later, the reactor activates and the Demon Lord erupts in a massive explosion that tears its body apart completely. With the Demon Lord destroyed, the remaining fairies begin to scatter in all directions, without a leader to control them anymore. They panic and flee. From above, Xylo and Teorita watch as the knights below finally realize that the battle is over. The nightmare has finally ended. Xylo has defeated Demon Lords several times before, but this is the first time he has ever seen one go down in such a ridiculous and unexpected way. Even so, he cannot deny the truth. Their victory is only possible because Dada acted like a thief, just as he always does. Xylo decides that later, he will treat Dada to some beer as a way of saying thank you. Meanwhile, Teorita is still full of energy and clearly wants praise from Xylo now that everything is over. She keeps pestering him and asking for attention. After a while, Xylo finally gives in and is about to rub her head. However, the moment he raises his hand, painful memories rush back to him. He suddenly remembers the former goddess he once had a contract with. Before he can say anything, Commander Kivia suddenly appears behind him. She tells him that he is in serious trouble. She accuses him of stealing a goddess while in transit, taking the scorched terrain seal without permission, and acting on his own to subdue the Demon Lord. Xylo does not argue with her at all. He simply accepts it and says he is ready to face whatever punishment comes his way. Teorita immediately steps forward and starts defending him. She says that if all of this happened, then their meeting must have been fate. She firmly believes that Xylo is the only knight capable of fully accepting her power and the only one who can continue defeating Demon Lords in the future. Hearing this, Kivia is shocked. She then decides to tell Teorita the truth about Xylo. She explains that he is known as a penal hero because of a serious crime he committed. That crime was killing the goddess he once had a contract with. The scene then shifts back to the past, to the moment Xylo stood in court, being judged for the murder of Goddess Senerva, his former goddess. Xylo desperately tries to explain what really happened. He tells them that Senerva was obsessed with praise and validation. She wanted to defeat the Demon Lord by herself and be celebrated by the entire army. Because of that desire, she pushed herself far beyond her limits. She eventually became defenseless and began to lose her power. Seeing this, Xylo says he chose to end her life to spare her from a much worse fate. He goes on to explain that what happens to a goddess after she loses her power is no small matter. Over time, she would be corrupted by the demon blight and turn into a mindless monster. He warns them that this corruption could even lead to the birth of a demon lord that wields a goddess's power. Xylo insists that Senerva understood this truth as well. She had already begun to feel the corruption setting in, which is why she was the one who gave him permission to kill her, despite everything he says. The judge refuses to believe his story. The judge is convinced that Xylo is nothing more than a dangerous murderer. He completely dismisses the idea that a goddess could be corrupted after losing her power, claiming that no such cases have ever been reported. Xylo continues to argue, trying desperately to convince the court that a corrupted goddess would be one of the most dangerous threats imaginable. Before he can say anything more, the guards suddenly restrain him. They force him to the floor and begin beating him without mercy. It is at that moment that Xylo finally understands that proving his innocence is impossible. This trial was never meant to be fair. It was a setup from the very beginning. The judge then delivers the final sentence. Xylo is declared a penal hero. At that exact moment, Xylo makes a silent vow. He swears that one day he will find the people who set him and his holy knights up, and when he does, he will kill every last one of them. A little while later, Xylo then wakes up to see Teorita leaning over him, asking if he's okay. She lets him know that it was Venedum who asked her to wake him up. Teorita continues to ramble on about how she wants to ensure Xylo's well-being and make sure nothing bad happens to him, but Xylo can't help but wonder why she's still here in the first place, especially since the Holy Knights already told her about what what he did to the last goddess he was contracted to. Teriota admits that they did tell her everything, including how he killed the goddess, but she says she doesn't think much of it because she's convinced that Xylo must have had a good reason for doing so. Hearing that, Xylo simply turns away and goes back to sleep, telling her that his reason doesn't matter at all. What matters, in his eyes, is that he killed a goddess, and that's the end of the story. He explains that a contract between a goddess and a human can be ended by mutual consent, so he tells Teriota to just agree to end the contract and move on already. However, Teriota firmly refuses and says she won't do that. She tells him that she has already named him as her knight and has no intention of changing her mind about him. Just then, Venetum speaks telepathically to Xylo and informs him that their next mission is in. He tells Xylo to head over to headquarters so they can discuss the mission details. Teriota grabs Xylo by the arm and suggests that they should hurry since her power will be needed for the mission. Before they can leave, they hear a loud noise coming from outside the tent. Teriota immediately starts to look concerned, but Xylo calmly tells her not to worry because it's just Tatsuya and his majesty, heroes just like him. With that said, they all put on their winter jackets and make their way to the next mission, though everyone quickly gets irritated by how loud Teriota is as they walk. Meanwhile, Cormadino meets with Kivia and informs her that the transport of the goddess has been suspended. Because of that, her new mission is to clear the Zuangan tunnels. Kivia asks if those areas have also been affected by demon blight, and the commander explains that ever since the Fourth War of Subjugation began, the forests in that region have been corrupted and the soil has steadily degraded. Over the course of 20 years, humanity has lost half of its land. The shogun adds that they have already sent a hero unit to Zuangan and tells Kivia that if she travels on horseback, she should be able to catch up with them quickly. Seeing the urgency of the situation, Kivia agrees to take on the mission and immediately sets off. Later that night, the heroes sit around a campfire trying to heat themselves up, but Teriota suddenly recalls that she hasn't seen Dada in a while. One of the guys there, named Norgal, tells her that Dada is still in the repair shop, most likely because Xylo hit him. He then calls the heroes his loyal subjects and tells them that they need to be more careful next time. Xylo acknowledges this and refers to Norgal as Your Majesty. Teriota notices this and asks why Xylo is referring to him as Your Majesty. So Xylo explains that it's because Norgal is completely convinced that he's the king of the Federated Kingdom. Apparently, Norgal committed a large-scale terrorist attack against his usurpers, and as a result, he was sentenced to become a hero. Teriota then gets curious about the guy sitting quietly in the corner, so Xylo explains that it's Tatsuya. He admits that he's not really sure what Tatsuya did, but he's been a hero longer than any of them have. Teriota notices that Tatsuya appears distant and disconnected from the world around him. Xylo explains that each time a hero is resurrected, they lose a portion of their mind, along with fragments of their memories. Hearing that, Teriota is left in awe as she realizes that being sentenced to be a hero is a lot deeper than she originally thought it was. The next morning, they arrive at Zuangan expecting a warm welcome, but everyone there seems gloomy and worn down. Xylo goes to speak with one of the villagers to explain that he's here to get the tunnels under control and deal with the demon blight, but the woman simply walks off and tells him that there's no point anymore, saying that if only they had come sooner, things might have been different. After that encounter, Xylo runs into a child who points him in the direction of the tunnels, so he starts heading that way. However, the child suddenly calls out to him while crying and asks whether her dad is coming back. Xylo can't bring himself to face her, so he just walks away with his teeth clenched. As Xylo and the others head down into the tunnel, Teriota recalls hearing something about a sacred seal, so she asks him what that is. Xylo explains that sacred seals are essentially wisdom bestowed upon them by the gods. However, with the way his body currently is, there are only two he can use for now. He adds that sacred seals are actually Norgal's specialty, since he's a genius who can single-handedly perform the kind of tuning that would normally require several people. Norgal then explains that sacred seals have multiple effects, including the ability to call lightning from above, crack the earth below, and unleash intense heat. He demonstrates this by lighting a lamp using a sacred seal, which makes Teriota extremely excited, but Xylo quickly urges her not to get too carried away, reminding her that they can't defeat their enemies using sacred seals alone. Shortly after, they reach the entrance of the tunnel. Venetum acknowledges that their mission is to excavate a direct route for the Holy Knights to attack from, right before they can step inside. He reminds them that as their commander, he cannot enter the tunnel himself. He has to stay outside and give them orders. With that said, he leaves as quickly as he can, but Xylo immediately knows that Venetum was just too scared to come in himself. With that matter aside, they head into the tunnels and begin digging the path for the Holy Knights to come through. After a little while, Xylo starts to get a bit tired, so Teriota suggests taking over for him and continuing the digging. Xylo instantly refuses, saying there is no way he is going to waste a goddess's stamina on something something as trivial as digging. Tyorida pouts at hearing this, disappointed. But that is when Kivia arrives with a group of knights. She says she is glad to see Xylo actually doing his job for once. Kivia then tries to persuade Tyorida to go with her unit to rest, but Tyorida immediately refuses, saying she wants to stay with Xylo and watch him, which makes Kivia slightly upset. Putting that aside, Kivia lets Xylo know that she heard it was actually Dada who stole Tyorida's coffin, not him, and asks why he never spoke up about it. Xylo replies that she probably would not have believed him anyway, even if he had said something. Kivia tells Xylo that he must tell her everything in the future, and that whenever they are on a mission together, it is his obligation to be honest with her. Speaking of missions, Xylo comments on how pointless this one seems. This is a ferried mine, so there would be no real purpose in digging it up. He wonders what they are truly after and questions whether they might be planning to use Tyorida for some hidden objective. Kivia does not answer directly. She simply walks off and tells Xylo to get back to work. Xylo spends the next few minutes digging, and then he breaks into a hollow spot that is filled with fairies. Tatsuya immediately jumps in and uses his impressive combat skills to wipe out the first wave. Xylo then steps in and contributes, dealing damage as well. The last of the fairies are destroyed when Tatsuya executes a powerful finishing move. The other members arrive shortly afterward and are impressed by Tatsuya's abilities because he did not even need Xylo's help and could have handled the fight on his own. Norgal then shines his sacred lamp and surveys the area. He notices that, despite some points of corruption, the surface still appears to be safe. He decides that this location will serve as the Holy Knight's frontline base, and construction should begin immediately. Xylo walks over to the supply chest and prepares to begin construction. Tyorida is still eager to assist in any way she can. Seeing her enthusiasm, Xylo decides to cut her some slack and provides her with instructions on where to place the stakes for the construction. But Norgal suddenly interrupts them as he unveils his best supply chest ever. And it actually looks really cool. It also has an inbuilt security system that turns it into a war weapon when something unexpected comes near it. Norgal's plan is to just leave the box there for their enemies, and anyone stupid enough to touch the box would be scorched by the flames of judgment. He then unveils the key, which is the only way to disarm it, and Xylo immediately takes it from him because he knows leaving that thing armed would only get the entire strike team killed. After that, they all start feeling a bit hungry, so Xylo decides to make lunch for everyone. But the food is taking too long to cook since it needs stronger heat. At that moment, Norgal pulls out a lamp and uses it to burn the meat, nearly roasting it completely. Shortly after that, they receive a sudden distress signal, where someone informs them that his team is under attack as a result of the dormant demon blight. Meanwhile, Kivia and the other soldiers are being pressed on the front lines by some fairies that just spawned out of nowhere. Xylo and the others arrive and realize it's a lot worse than expected. Xylo is just about getting ready to chart when Tyorida calls him back because she just noticed that these fairies used to be human and just got transformed into this demon form. Xylo confirms that and says they're known as knockers, and once they reach this state, there's no hope of turning them back human. Kivia and her men are still getting pressed by the fairies, so she gives the order to the heroes to flank in. So Tatsuya jumps in and wipes out several fairies all in one attack. Tyorida sees those fairies die and can't help but feel bad because those were once humans but got turned into this devilish form against their own will. Xylo feels it would be best to just put them out of their misery, so he joins in the battle and uses his exploding sword to deal a ton of damage. At the end of the day, they end up defeating all the fairies, and even the knights are left surprised because they had no idea that humans alike could get turned into fairies. That aside, they all find out that there were some mine workers who didn't make it out on time, so Norgal suggests they go and rescue them. But Kivia immediately shuts it down because she knows doing that would only risk the holy knights they have here. Kivia asks for Xylo's opinion, so after he thinks about it for a while, he tells her that if they go for this rescue mission, they should expect to take a ton of losses. Then all of a sudden, an imperial priest shows up out of nowhere and asks Kivia why she is even asking for Xylo's opinion in the first place. He feels abandoning the workers would be the best option, so he plans on using scorched seals to close off the tunnels and abandon them. Norgal gets pissed off at the idea of the priest wanting to abandon some civilians, so he starts to get a little aggressive, which makes some of the knights hold him down. Xylo just tells Norgal to calm down and do as they say, or else they may just use his hero mark and kill him. But Xylo then turns around to see the sad look on Tyorida's face, and it reminds him of the girl he met in the Zuengan village. So he changes his mind and decides to go save the civilians. He tells Kivia that if they fail to make it out in time, she should just bury them alive inside the tunnel. Xylo lets Kivia and the others know that his plan would hinder the Holy Knight's mission, as only the heroes would take part, so fatalities would be limited to the heroes. Tyorida suddenly gets excited as she hears she's finally going going to get some action by saving the civilians, but Xylo bursts her bubble by telling her to stay here because they can't risk putting a goddess in unnecessary danger. Tyorda gets pissed off and yells at him to reconsider, but that's when a holy knight steps in to stop her. With that out of the way, Xylo lets them know that he's not doing this because he actually cares about the civilians in the slightest. He's just doing it because he's really mad right now at both himself and the people who are constantly awaiting his death. Xylo feels his grave has already been dug, so it's time for him to march in as far as he can go. The miners are just about to get slaughtered by the fairies, but that's when Xylo comes to the rescue. Throwing his exploding dagger with deadly precision, Tatsuya jumps into the fight and uses his brute strength to slaughter the rest of the fairies one by one, and the miners are so taken by surprise that all they can do is watch, unable to believe what is happening. Xylo ends the fight by sending a flying dagger that kills every last one of the fairies, which marks their rescue mission as a complete success. After it is done, Norgal walks in and immediately takes all the credit, asking the miners if they are okay. After that, they spend about an hour sitting around a fire, and the miners start to get worried, wondering whether anyone is going to come to their aid. Xylo tells them not to worry because the Holy Knights will be here shortly to retrieve them. He then explains that each of them is going to need to take up a weapon for protection, after which Norgal will amplify it by placing a sacred seal on it. Norgal explains that sacred seals normally do not work well in places with low sunlight, but because he is so skilled, he has crafted a special type of seal that works even underground. While he continues his explanation, one of the miners notices a strange ornament on Xylo's scarf and asks him about it. Xylo explains that it is an ornament that measures the amount of luminescence in his body, and the intensity of its flow shows how much luminescence remains. Norgal sees that Xylo has far more luminescence than the average person, and now understands why Xylo is considered such an elite soldier. Shortly after, everyone readies their weapons as they plan to advance back to the entrance of the tunnel. Norgal advises Everton to keep their guard up, since they are very likely to run into fairies on the way. The plan is for Tatsuya to lead the front while Xylo takes the rear, ensuring that everyone is protected as they move forward through the dangerous tunnel. Norgal tells every one of them that he has no plan to leave them, trying to calm their nerves and make them feel safer in the middle of this chaos. Then he looks at Xylo and says he will make him commander-in-chief if he survives this fight, but Xylo knows it's just the same empty talk he always throws around, so he just nods without saying anything. Suddenly, the ground shakes violently and several fairies burst out of the earth, flying in all directions. Xylo immediately reacts, pulling out a pair of exploding daggers and taking down a couple of the fairies before they can get too close. This sudden attack changes their original plan, so Xylo quickly tells everyone to form a battle line in this spot. The miners look at the overwhelming number of fairies and feel it is almost impossible to fight all of them, but Norgal feels confident that they can manage it. He goes on to give them strong, motivating words, telling them they have what it takes to survive this and fight back. Then, with a determined look, he gives the signal for the attack to begin. Meanwhile, at the entrance of the tunnel, the Holy Knights are just standing around doing nothing. Kivia and the priest notice that Tyorda has been feeling sulky and upset ever since they separated her from Xylo. The priest doubts they will be able to use her as a weapon this way, worried that her mood will interfere with her fighting ability. Kivia, however, feels that Tyorda will get over her sulking soon and will be able to focus, and he believes they can rely on her to help defeat the demon lord if needed. Back in the heart of the tunnel, the heroes and the miners have been able to defeat every last fairy, but the fight leaves everyone exhausted. The miners collapse to the ground, catching their breath after fighting for so long with no rest. Xylo shouts at them to get up, warning that sitting there and staying down will only get them eaten by any remaining enemies. But even with his warning, the miners don't budge. Norgal steps forward and speaks with calm but powerful words, motivating them and reminding them of their strength and why they must keep fighting. His words finally reach them, and the miners now have a look of determination in their eyes. Watching this, Xylo realizes that Norgal is far more convincing and inspiring than he ever could be. Suddenly, the ground shakes again, and several fairies rush into the area, more determined than before. Xylo throws an exploding dagger at one of them, but it only stops that single fairy, and the rest keep coming. The miners now have no choice but to fight for themselves. At first, fear grips them and they hesitate, but when they see how effective the magical seals Norgal put on their weapons are, their confidence grows immediately. They begin to fight back with strength and skill, striking the fairies with more power and precision than before. Things continue to go smoothly for a while, but that changes when the leader of the miners gets cornered by one of the fairies and is just about to become monster food. Just as it looks like he is about to be killed, several streams of blue spear attacks suddenly come out of nowhere and wipe out a large wave of the fairies. The powerful attack shocks everyone. Xylo in particular wonders where such a strong attack could have come from, so he looks into the distance. That is when he sees Teorida. She looks at him with a confident smile and tells him that she is here to save the day. Xylo walks up to Teorida and asks how she got here. She explains that she simply snuck away from the knights and that it really was not that hard for someone as talented as her. After saying that, she asks Xylo to pat her head and give her some praise, clearly wanting his approval. However, Xylo just walks away and says there is no way he is doing that. Teorida asks him what is wrong. Confused by his reaction, Xylo tells her that it is not like he was expecting her to come and save him. Hearing this makes Teorida feel sad, and she asks Xylo what exactly it is that he wants from her. Xylo turns away again and tells Teorida that all he wants is for her to stay alive. He says that she should not go around and get herself killed just for the sake of praise or attention. Hearing this makes Teorida's face light up, because she understands that Xylo truly cares about her life. She looks at Xylo with a bright smile and tells him that she will always risk her life as long as he is in danger, showing that she is determined to protect him no matter what. The ground suddenly shakes again, and several fairies come rushing in once more. As usual, Xylo quickly uses his daggers to take out a couple of them, and for a moment, everything seems to be going just fine. The battle feels under control, and it looks like they might be able to keep pushing forward. However, that sense of control is suddenly broken when a high-pitched sound begins to echo all around the cave. The sound is so sharp and painful that everyone, including Xylo, covers their ears and screams in agony. The noise fills the entire area and makes it almost impossible to think or move properly. Seeing Xylo in pain, Teorida quickly rushes to his side. She uses her magic to grant him healing and protection, and as a result, Xylo is no longer affected by the high-pitched sound. Once he is able to think clearly again, Teorida explains that the sound came from the Demon Blight Master. Her tone becomes serious as she realizes what that means. Shortly after she says this, a powerful presence can be felt in the cave. The demon lord named Lotus then shows herself, making it clear that the battle is about to become far more dangerous than before. Lotus lets out a high-pitched scream that affects everyone else and turns them into zombies that begin walking toward her. But Xylo does his best to draw as many of them away as he can. However, Tetsuya does not seem to be affected by the scream at all, so Xylo gives him the signal to head straight for Lotus and defeat her. Tetsuya moves forward and does a good job cutting down Lotus's defenses as he pushes closer to her. She tries to use her scream on him, but it has no effect, and Tetsuya keeps going without slowing down. Tetsuya finally reaches Lotus and slices her in two. Everyone thinks it is all over at this point, and for a brief moment, it feels like they have won. But then Tetsuya suddenly gets wrapped up in Lotus's tentacles. This makes Xylo realize that what Tetsuya cut was only a decoy and not her real body. Teorida quickly points out that her real body is hanging from the wall. Xylo gets ready to hit it with an exploding dagger, but just then his ornament flashes, showing that he is out of energy and cannot use it. At that moment, the Holy Knights finally arrive and prepare to join the fight. However, Lotus lets out another loud scream that makes all the knights collapse to the ground in pain. Both the miners and the knights are about to be grabbed and taken by Lotus's tentacles. Just when things seem hopeless, Norgal suddenly bursts out from one of the tentacles. He uses the special lanterns that were made to burn parts of Lotus's body. The flames weaken Lotus and her tentacles, forcing her to release the people she was holding. Norgal is about to use another blast from the lantern, but Lotus suddenly grabs him and lifts him up, holding him upside down in the air. Seeing this, Teorida quickly picks up one of the lanterns and throws it towards Xylo, hoping he can use it to finish Lotus off. However, Lotus sees this coming and uses her tentacles to block Xylo from getting a clear shot. Norgal is still being held by the leg by one of Lotus's tentacles, and he realizes he has no other choice. With great pain and determination, he uses his sword to cut off his own leg to free himself. As he falls, he uses his last strength to stab Lotus in the eye. This creates the opening Xylo needs. Xylo grabs the lantern and uses it to finish Lotus off, finally bringing the demon lord down for good. Shortly after the fight ends, the miners surround Norgal as he lies on the floor. They tell him how he just saved all of their lives and how they will never forget what he did for them. Even though the enemy has been defeated, Xylo cannot shake the uneasy feeling in his chest, sensing that the cost of this victory was very high. Not long after, they head back up to the surface of Zuengan. The miners reunite with their families, who are overjoyed to see that their loved ones made it back alive. However, the people of Zuengan are surprised that it was people like Xylo and his group who saved them, since they are supposed to be dangerous criminals. Xylo does not really care about what people think. He is just glad that Norgal is going to get a new leg, knowing that all these lives were saved because Norgal was willing to sacrifice his own. Meanwhile, the priest is still thinking about punishing Xylo and the others for breaking so many rules during the mission. But Kivia stops him and tells him that even if they are criminals, they still saved many lives today. She says they should at least be allowed to have their moment of glory before any punishment is decided. After that, it doesn't take long before the heroes receive their next mission, so they get back on the road and start traveling to their next destination, which is a nearby town. While they travel, Tyorida notices that there are many more people on the road now compared to the last time they passed through this area. Venetum, even though he is out of breath, explains to her that this is because the town they are heading to is holding a small festival. Venetum then suggests that they stop and take a short break, but Xylo refuses and calls him weak, saying they just took a break not too long ago. They continue traveling for the rest of the day until they finally arrive at their destination, which is an important fortress that serves as a defense point for the second capital and is known as Murid Fortress. They enter the fortress soon after, and it doesn't take long before Dada starts stealing wine from local street vendors. Venetum feels this is very bad behavior, especially after just getting patched up at the hero repair shop. However, Dada just shrugs and believes that a little stealing will not hurt. He says that relaxing and drinking wine is the best way for them to enjoy their day off, and besides, he thinks no one will even notice anyway. At the same time, Xylo is shown locked in a cell for his earlier disobedience, and he seems to be enjoying one of his favorite books while inside. That is when Norgal suddenly appears and asks Xylo to go buy some wine for him because the caravan traders have just arrived. Xylo reminds Norgal that they are out of military scrip, meaning they have no more of the money provided by the military. He tells him that if he wants to buy anything, he will have to borrow money. Norgal becomes angry just from hearing this, so he storms off, and Xylo is glad because he can go back to reading his book in peace. However, his reading is interrupted again when Tyorida comes in to talk to him. It turns out that Dada stole the key from one of the guards and unlocked the cell, but even though the door is now open, Xylo chooses to stay inside because he enjoys the peace and quiet. Tyorida comes in and asks him if he is going to visit for the Great Exchange. Xylo replies in an annoyed way and says he has no intention of seeing those holy knights, so he is just going to stay in the cell. Tyorida thinks this is good news because it means he will have time to play Zig with her, which is a new game that Dada taught her how to play. She begins setting up the game for them to play, but Xylo quickly tells her that he doesn't have time for that because he is focused on his book. After hearing this, Tyorida becomes very curious about what could be so important in what he is reading. Xylo admits that he is reading poetry, which shocks Tyorida because she never expected him to be the type who likes poetry. Tyorida insists on seeing the book for herself, so Xylo explains that it is an ancient book called Dragon Drunk, written by a very famous poet from long ago named Altoyard Comet. However, there was something strange about Altoyard. One day, Altoyard suddenly began to imagine himself becoming a dragon. He spent many days practicing flying, and eventually, he ended up killing himself. Even though this story sounds strange, Xylo says he still admires him. He explains that if he had not become a hero, he would have wanted to be a poet like Altoyard. Tyorida starts to shiver just thinking about a tough warrior like Xylo turning into a strange, crazy poet. Suddenly, Kivia walks in and is surprised to see Tyorida there with him. Xylo assumes that she is there to announce his fate, but Kivia says that is not why she came. Instead, she says she wants to talk to him about something important. Before Kivia can walk away, Tyorida speaks up and says that she wants to come along with them. The Great Exchange Festival is happening in town right now, so Tyorida feels it would be best for them to talk while walking around and shopping. Both Xylo and Kivia know that there is no arguing when Tyorida is in this excited and cheerful mood, so they decide to go along with her plan and let her join them for the festival. They enter the festival, and Tyorida is completely amazed by all the different cultures, and especially by the food. She has never tried any of these dishes before, so she is very eager to taste them. Xylo sends Tyorida off to buy some ice cream for them, and after she runs off, this gives Kivia and Xylo a chance to talk in private. Kivia admits that because of recent events, she has changed her opinion of him a little. She says that he saved her soldier back in Kuvenge, and that he also saved the civilians in the Zuangan district, even when her team was ready to abandon them. Xylo is glad that she has finally realized this, and he lets out a small smirk. Putting that aside, Kivia says that Xylo has shown real results, and because of that, Tyorida may have been saved simply because she formed a covenant with him. Xylo has no idea what she is talking about, so Kivia explains that Tyorida's existence was confirmed in the northern ruins. After that discovery, the Holy Knights were given the mission to form a covenant with her after the excavation, and to manage and make use of her powers. Unfortunately, the military and the temple did not agree on what should be done. When Xylo hears this, he scoffs and says it must have been hard for them. Kivia immediately fires back and says that all of this happened because he killed the goddess Senerva in the first place. She explains that after Senerva was killed, the military came up with a new idea. They began wondering if they could do the opposite and increase the number of goddesses instead. Their plan was to examine Tyorida to see if this was possible, but everyone knows that really means cutting her open and dissecting her. The temple was always strongly against such a cruel idea, but the military currently has the upper hand, so there was very little the temple could do to stop it. However, the situation is slowly starting to change because Xylo defeated 2 demon blights in a short amount of time and showed how useful Teorita truly is. Kivia explains that goddesses come in many different forms, and each one has her own powerful and unique ability. However, they only awaken when a demon blight appears, and after completing their mission, they return to their coffins and fall back into sleep. Teorita's power, however, is only recorded as being able to summon swords. Compared to the other 12 goddesses that have been summoned so far, Teorita's power is considered the weakest. After hearing all of this, Xylo finally understands everything. The reckless move Kivia made back in Kuvenge must have been her way of trying to atone for being seen as weak or useless. Even so, Xylo clenches his fist in anger because there is no way he is going to let anything happen to her. He knows that if he performs well on the next mission, Teorita will not be dissected. Because of this, Xylo asks Kivia to tell him about the next mission right away. He says he is going to make them recognize Teorita's true value, even if it is the last thing he ever does. Kivia explains that their next mission is a defense mission, where only the heroes will be responsible for protecting the fortress. Kivia advises him to defend it with his life, because whether Teorita lives or dies depends on how well they carry out this task. Later on, Venatum and Xylo meet up with the commander, and he explains to them that for this mission, defending the fortress means that they are required to stay inside the fortress and continue holding their position until they eventually die. He explains that the Holy Knights will stay behind at the rear and hold back their strength, and that once the heroes have been killed and the fortress has finally fallen, the Holy Knights will then move in and launch a special attack of their own. Venatum becomes curious and asks what this special attack is supposed to be, so the commander explains that the goddess of the Ninth Order will be the one to use her power. He says that she will attack the Demon Lord by using her lethal poison ability. However, all of them understand that an attack like that will not truly be able to completely kill the Demon Lord for good. The commander is perfectly aware of this fact, which is exactly why he says that he has come up with a new and different plan. He explains that the third goddess has the ability to see into the future, and because of this, Galtual was able to revise and change their overall strategy. This is why they came up with the idea of turning the Myriad Fortress itself into a massive lethal poison trap. The fortress would be used as a giant trap that would continue poisoning and damaging the monster over and over again without stopping. After hearing this full plan, Xylo and Venatum do not understand why they would still need to die for this to work, since they believe they could simply lure the Demon Lord into the fortress and then escape afterward once the trap is active. However, the commander strongly insists that them dying is a required part of the plan. He explains that if even a single one of them tries to leave or escape, the sacred seal that is placed on their necks will activate. When that happens, the seal will kill everyone in their unit all at once. After hearing this explanation, Venatum quickly says that both he and Xylo understand the order and that they are willing to carry out the mission as they were told. However, he also says that there are still a few things about the plan that he would like to try to improve. Venatum steps closer to the commander and points out that making the seals kill everyone in their unit if even one person leaves is a terrible and very risky plan. He explains that since many of them are criminals and people with flawed and unstable personalities, it would be very easy for one of them to suddenly get bored or careless and try to leave. If that happens, it would cause the rest of them to be killed for no real reason at all. Venatum believes that a much smarter and safer decision would be to make it so that everyone only dies if everyone tries to escape together. That way, the operation would be carried out in a smoother way and with much less risk of the mission failing by accident. The commander is clearly shaken by this suggestion, but in the end, he tells Venatum that he is in no position to give that kind of permission or to make changes to how the sacred seals work. After that, Venatum tells Xylo to go get Kivia, and as Xylo walks away, Venatum leans in and whispers to him. Xylo tells Venatum everything he will need for the mission to succeed, listing all the items, plans, and preparations he requires. After Xylo finishes explaining everything, he asks Venatum how he can trust him to actually get all of it. Venatum looks at him straight in the eyes and says that, despite how he may seem, he is the man who is one step away from saving the world, so Xylo has no choice but to trust him. The scene then shifts to the past, and we see Venatum sitting alone in a dark room, his hands bound in shackles, as he confesses all of his crimes to the Chancellor. It turns out that Venatum used to be a grade A con artist who had committed over 100 scams before finally getting caught. Venatum wonders nervously if he is going to be sentenced to death, but the Chancellor tells him that, unfortunately, that will not be the case. Instead, the Chancellor brings out a famous article that Venatum wrote a long time ago for the company he used to work for. The article covered some controversial topics about demons disguised as members members of the royal family being controlled by the demon blight. Although the claims were not entirely true, Venetum admits that he did write the article, but only because his bosses instructed him to write controversial stories that would attract readers, especially when nothing interesting was happening in the kingdom. The Chancellor explains that he has no problem with Venetum fabricating stories. The real problem is that Venetum tells the truth in a way that people believe, which is far more dangerous, especially since he is a con artist who is exceptionally skilled at convincing others. Venetum is completely confused and has no idea what is happening. The Chancellor then says that, in order to prevent him from speaking the truth again, they are going to place a special shackle on his sacred seal. At that moment, several soldiers enter the room and proceed to restrain Venetum. Venetum begins begging, still confused about why this is happening. The Chancellor looks at him calmly and says that the death penalty would actually be too good for him. Instead, Venetum is going to be sentenced to become a hero. The scene shifts back to Xylo and Dada in their cell. They remark that Venetum obtained everything they asked for except granting amnesty. Setting that aside, Xylo asks if Tsav has returned to the unit yet. Dada says he should have been back by now, but as he thinks more about it, he begins to feel that Tsav might have been better off staying with Venetum. Dada has a strange feeling that Tsav is going to cause trouble at any moment. Meanwhile, in the town square, Tsav is seen gambling with a group of civilians. After a round ends, Tsav notices that the man he just played against was cheating. He immediately calls the man out for it. The man, offended, grabs Tsav by the collar, but Tsav reacts quickly. He uses a pocket knife to slice the man's hand off, and then he smiles brightly, completely unbothered by what he just did. It becomes clear that Dada was right all along. This Tsav guy is a real troublemaker, and someone who is likely to cause chaos at any opportunity. The scene then shifts to Tsav being interrogated by some holy knights. One of the guards tries to remind Tsav of all the people he has killed, hoping that this might make him feel some kind of regret. However, Tsav openly admits that he killed all of them. He even says that it felt good to him, explaining that this is simply how the Gwen Mosa people live and think. Hearing this, the guard feels disgusted. He cannot believe that Tsav shows no remorse at all for the lives he took. The man tells Tsav that he is facing a life sentence, or possibly even the death penalty. He asks how Tsav can be so calm and not scared at all. Tsav answers honestly. He admits that he is afraid, but says there is nothing he can do to change his fate. Because of that, he sees no reason to worry. Instead, he wants to enjoy whatever time he has left. Hearing this response makes the guard feel both scared and sickened. He cannot understand how another human being could think in such a twisted way. Just then, the Chancellor walks into the room. He remains calm and composed as he asks Tsav how he chose the people he killed. Tsav explains that the victims simply spoke to him in a certain way, and after that, his instincts took over. He goes on to say that he believes there is not a single person in the world he could not kill if he truly decided to do so. According to Tsav, once he sets his mind on it, the outcome is guaranteed. This answer is all the Chancellor needs. He calmly states that the death penalty would be far too kind for someone as dangerous as Tsav. Instead, he delivers a far worse sentence. Tsav is sentenced to become a hero. Tsav immediately understands what this means and how serious the punishment is. He knows this means he would be forced to relive the miserable life imposed on him over and over again, with dying being out of the question. Panicking, he begs the Chancellor to reconsider. However, the Chancellor simply presses his hands down on Tsav's shoulders and gives him a wide, unsettling grin, making it clear that the decision is final. The scene then returns to the present. Tsav is now traveling across an open field with the other heroes, likely heading toward the next destination of their mission. However, Xylo and the rest of the group clearly cannot stand him. Tsav keeps talking non-stop, telling a long and pointless story that no one cares about. As he continues rambling, the others grow more annoyed, already regretting having to travel alongside him. Setting everything else aside, the group continues their journey. After reaching a certain point, Kivia pulls out her binoculars to survey the land ahead. As she studies the distance, she realizes that the enemy forces have already moved much farther than expected. Based on their speed, she estimates that they will reach the fortress by tonight. That is when the real battle will begin. Kivia adds that there will be about 50 trusted soldiers from the order stationed at the fortress. However, Xylo does not seem confident. He points out that even with 50 trained soldiers, it will not be enough. Even if they include the prisoners that Venetum captured earlier, he believes their numbers are still far too small to make a real difference. Just then, Dada suddenly speaks up, saying that he has spotted fairy scouts in the distance. He quickly raises his binoculars to get a better look. Tsav, however, does not need any tools and simply looks ahead with his own eyes. Kivia is shocked when she realizes that Tsav can see the scouts from such a long distance. Xylo explains calmly that Tsav has inhuman vision. Xylo orders Tsav to take care of the situation. Tsav pulls out a special rifle that was tuned and adjusted by Norgal specifically for him. He calmly lines up his shot shot, stares down the barrel, and fires. The bullet hits one of the fairies directly, even though the target is more than 200 meters away. Sav feels proud of himself after the shot, but Dada quickly warns him that more fairies are approaching. Without hesitation, Sav resumes firing. One after another, he shoots down the fairy scouts without missing a single shot. Xylo watches without concern. He fully trusts that Sav and Dada can handle the scouts, especially since Xylo has never once seen Sav miss a bullet. While Sav and Dada continue dealing with the fairies, Xylo signals for Kivia to follow him. The two of them move ahead to begin setting up traps around the area. As the sun begins to set, they finally arrive at the entrance of the fortress. There, they encounter the 9th goddess, Pelmari, along with Horde, the captain of the 9th Order of the Holy Knights. Horde looks at Kivia and says that he cannot believe she is still choosing to follow the plan and stay behind to fight alongside the heroes. He then looks at Xylo with disdain and tells Pelmari to stay close, warning that Xylo is a goddess killer. Pelmari then turns to Horde and asks if she was useful in her role today. After Horde confirms that she did well, Pelmari happily asks for a head pat and some praise. Horde gives her both without hesitation. After that, Pelmari and Horde walk past Xylo and Kivia without another word, clearly leaving some unresolved tension in the air. After that, they both move into an area filled with explosive barrels. The plan is to lure the Demon Lord into this zone. Once the Demon Lord is inside, the barrels, which are filled with poison, will be detonated. The poison and explosions are meant to kill the Demon Lord, but it is clear that the heroes would also die in the process. Sav is clearly not excited about this outcome, but everyone understands that they have no other choice and must follow the plan. A guard overhears this and walks over to Sav to teach him a lesson for what he said. He grabs Sav by the collar, but Sav reacts quickly, pulling out a pocket knife and preparing to slash his hand. Suddenly, one of the guard's friends pulls them apart before anything worse can happen. On the other side, Xylo grips Sav's arm and tells him to restrain himself from killing anyone. Just then, Teorda suddenly appears and vents her frustration at both Xylo and Kivia. She is angry because they left her alone at the festival. Kivia quickly apologizes and tries to calm her down, but Xylo does not seem to care at all. He shows no interest in the argument and remains focused on the mission. Putting that aside, Teorda points out that she saw Pelmari receive 7 head pats from Horde earlier that day, while she did not receive even one. Feeling left out, Teorda lowers her head and asks Xylo for a head pat as well. However, Xylo ignores her request and begins reviewing the plan again, treating it with complete seriousness. At that moment, one of the Holy Knights approaches Kivia with urgent news. He reports that a group of unknown men has gathered at the front gate and is demanding to see Xylo. Xylo immediately heads to the gate to see what is going on. When he arrives, he realizes that the men are miners from the Zuangan mines. They explain that they have come to offer their help in the mission. They want to repay Xylo and the heroes for saving their lives during the incident at the mine. Xylo listens to them and acknowledges their gratitude. However, he tells them that the mission ahead is far too dangerous for ordinary miners. He firmly orders them to return home to their families and stay safe. With that, he turns away and begins to leave. Before he can go far, Norgal suddenly steps forward and welcomes the miners into their ranks. Xylo turns back in shock and demands to know what Norgal is doing. Norgal calmly reminds him that their forces are already badly reduced. If they want any chance of success, they need as many people as they can possibly get. Xylo knows that involving these civilians, who have almost no combat training, could be dangerous. He thinks it might just be throwing their lives away. Norgal, however, says that he would never allow civilians to be forced into danger, but if they genuinely want to help, they should be able to do so. He then delivers a rousing speech, full of heavy words of motivation, which fires up the civilians. Energized and determined, they march inside, ready to assist. Xylo just sighs, realizing that things probably will not end well. Later that evening, Xylo goes over the plan with everyone one more time. He wants to make sure that there are no misunderstandings about each person's role. The plan is simple but precise. Xylo will go on the attack when the Demon Lord arrives. The others are to hold the line against the advancing fairies for as long as possible, giving Xylo the chance to lure the Demon Lord, Iblis, into the trap. The trap, which was set in advance near the fortress, is designed to take Iblis out before she reaches the stronghold. This is Xylo's plan to ensure that everyone survives. A few hours later, Venedum speaks Xylo as he brings news that he has received a sealed letter from Frensai Mastabolt. The Mastabolts are a family of Knight Gaunts from the south, and they are offering to lend some soldiers for the mission. Venedum thinks it would be a good idea to accept their help, but Xylo slams his hand on the table aggressively and shuts the conversation down. He tells Venedum that they will not accept the Mastabolts' help and that they need to find another alternative. Dada is currently out trying to raise money, so Xylo decides they will have to wait for him. Seeing Xylo frustrated, Venedum decides to explain something that Xylo is not very familiar with. He brings up the idea that there may be a faction of people who who actually worship demon lords. Xylo immediately dismisses it, thinking it is nonsense, especially since he had seen similar claims in one of Venedum's fake articles. Venedum acknowledges why Xylo would think that, but suggests that if there really is a group of people who worship the demon lords and want to coexist with them, it could explain why such a bizarre plan was ever created in the first place. Xylo thinks about this for a moment and concludes that if people really think like that, they must be the worst scumbags in all of history. By midnight, Xylo peers through his binoculars and sees the demon lord approaching, though she is still far away. At the same time, a large horde of fairies is advancing toward them, signaling that the battle is about to begin. This is the moment they have been waiting for, and the future of humanity depends on the outcome of this battle. Everyone is determined to give it their all. Norgal gives the command, and the front wing of their forces begins firing. Snipers pick off several fairies as they approach, slowing down the first wave. After that, the barricades are activated. The barriers stop any remaining fairies from breaking through, giving the defenders a small advantage. Kivia joins the fight on the front lines, fighting alongside the other holy knights. In just a few seconds, she wipes out several fairies before retreating to prepare for the second wave of attackers. But as they move back, a new threat appears. A group of humans on horseback suddenly rides toward the fortress, firing flaming arrows. The unexpected attack destroys part of their defenses, allowing some fairies to get inside. Now, the situation looks grim. Xylo and the others realize that they are clearly on the losing side. At first, Xylo did not want to believe it, but seeing it happen firsthand makes him understand the truth. There are humans who actively support the demon lord, with their defenses crumbling and more enemies pouring in. Xylo calculates the grim reality. At the current rate of destruction, he knows that everyone might be dead before the demon lord even arrives.